This episode is brought to you by 180 Markets, where it is our goal to bring every individual, fund manager, family office, or any qualified investor access to Australian Stock Exchange capital raises. If you are ever interested in how to access ASX capital raises in a super simple way, 180 Markets is for you. The sign-up process is easy. You just upload your ID, proof of your investor status, and your current brokerage account information. The settlement of shares goes right into your existing account, and you can access our very next capital raise. If you're interested in free, easy access to thousands of ASX capital raises, including placements, IPOs, reverse takeovers, and more, check out 180markets.com.au. Hello, everybody. Welcome again. Another edition, 18 minutes with 180 Markets. Investors, we always talk about being in the right sector, and one of the right sectors right now is copper. For those of you not aware, August has been record demand out of China. September shows no slowing down, and a trend is certainly up. When you look at the price, we're hovering right under $3.10 a pound and threatening to break out. In short, the commodity is in demand and strong. So in that case, you certainly want to be levered to it. And with us today, we have Andrew Stewart from Xanadu Mines, and he is certainly levered to copper price, copper exploration, especially with his large Mongolian projects. Anyway, enough with me. Andrew, welcome to 18 Minutes with 180 Markets.
Good afternoon, Greg, and thanks for having us on.
Andrew, everybody's got a story. Tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, Greg, I'm an exploration geologist with over 20 years experience. I've been looking and exploring for these types of porphyry copper deposits now for that 20 years. I've been working predominantly in Asia and worked with some of the companies such as Ivanhoe Mines, Oxiana, and also Vale. So most of that time in my experience has been spent in Mongolia, Central Asia, China, all the way through Indonesia, Philippines, etc. So been lucky enough to be involved in several greenfields discoveries, and really, what Xanadu is about is taking that passion for that discovery through and looking for copper deposits that large mining companies want to invest in or potentially build.
Fantastic. Andrew, we can't talk about Mongolian copper and not talk about your previous employer, Ivanhoe, and Robert Freelander, truly a legendary figure. Can you just tell us a little bit about what it was like to work with him?
Well, I think Ivanhoe is an interesting group, and often I get asked, why is Ivanhoe so successful at their exploration? And I think at the root of it, it's quite simple. What they do is they put together a team of very good geologists, and they pick geologists that have expertise in that particular area. You don't take someone that has a lot of expertise in, say, Yilgarn Gold from Kalgoorlie and ask him to go and look for said-hosted copper in Africa. So we put together a very good team, and they're very smart about that. Put together a good team because a good geologist can tell you where you need to be. They can tell you the good ground in prospective belts. And what you need to do is you need to secure a large landholding in a prospective belt. And I think it's important in this day and age, you're not going into mature terrains where everyone has been and the ideas are established and tested, going to areas where people are thinking outside the box. And Ivanhoe had that fortitude to allow that ability for the geological teams to get in, do the work early, secure a very large landholding in a prospective belt, and have trust in that team to deliver those discoveries if they're there. And I think that that's an important thing. And also the ability, obviously, Robert Freeland, is to fund that exploration. Early exploration can be difficult, can be challenging. You can't always have those discovery holes up first. And Oyu Tolgoi is a perfect example. It was 150 holes before, it was recognized that there was something significant here. And the real discovery then came on hole 270. So there's 270 holes. I mean, that takes a lot of patience, a lot of fortitude. And a company that has that fortitude and that confidence in the team on the ground is really what makes it successful. And it's something you don't see a lot of today. We're very much driven by what's the next drill hole like, where's the discovery, and you drill a good hole. You know, it's not always there. And, you know, it's quite interesting because people think, particularly the market, that once you drill a discovery hole, the next one's going to be better and they'll just continue to get better. But often, and you see stories, and, you know, I watch these very closely. You'll see someone drill a discovery hole, and, you know, it'll take them 9 months to understand the structure, and then they're off, and then they've got the resource together. So, you know, I think it's about patience and investing in a team that knows exactly what they're doing. And more importantly too, I think in this industry, it's not a surprise to me that certain individuals are involved with success.
Really?
And I think you've got to back those individuals a lot of the time, because they know what it takes to have the exploration success, and they know how to do it. And that's very important in this industry, because it's a pretty simple business. You know, secure a good block of ground in a prospective belt, drill, have discovery, and you know, that's the business.
Fantastic. And I'd like to come back to about securing the land, but for those of you first that don't know that much about Mongolian copper, can you just describe why it is so prospective and just the size of it compared to on a world stage?
What we have in Mongolia is centered or located or sandwiched between China and Russia. And we have a belt of rocks that goes from all the way from Far East China, all the way through Kazakhstan, basically to the edge of Turkey and Uzbekistan. But this is a belt of rocks that has some of the world's biggest copper deposits in Kazakhstan, China, and Mongolia now. But it's a belt of rocks that, you know, during the former Soviet period had very little exploration or modern exploration. And so when explorers started entering Mongolia in the late 90s, there was already world-class deposits there that had been developed by the state and still in production today. So this is an area where applying modern exploration, getting on the ground and looking, the prospectivity was always there. It just hadn't been explored. And when you're a company, you want to go to places where you can have that success, or the odds are stacked in your favour. This is a very tough business, exploration, and going to areas where you know they already exist is something you need to do. And more importantly too, it's about going into an area that hasn't had 1,000 geological hammers over it. And that's the ability to go in and be one of the first people on the ground. And that's what really attracted us to Mongolia in terms of Xanadu, was the ability to go and have globally significant discoveries there that, you know, are outcropping its surface. Mongolia provides that opportunity. And we are also very, very focused on, you know, the biggest consumer of copper is China. This is a copper belt that sits on the doorstep of the world's biggest consumer. So that was obviously an important driver. And for a junior company like Xanadu, we can run an exploration program incredibly cheaply. You know, we're not flying helicopters in central Kalimantan. We're not operating at 5,000 meters in the high Andes. We have a program that runs 12 months a year. We have cold winters, but you can run a program with a few land cruisers and geologists. There's no fences, there's no people, no mountains, no running rivers, no forests. You know, the Gobi is a fantastic place to explore, and in the most sparsely populated country in the world.
Fantastic. And I guess, you know, bringing it into your projects a little bit about, you know, the Gobi region, can you just discuss with us, you know, you have, I believe it's, you know, at least 3, if not 4 prospective areas, in any order you'd like?
Yeah, no, I'll start. We always have a portfolio approach to exploration, and you need that. You know, you need to be moving projects up the value curve, and you have them at different stages of the value curve, because having geologists, not all projects always work out, but you need to be willing to have a good team that can look at a project and go, okay, enough drilling, it's not working, let's move on to the next one. You can't be attached to projects, because I see too many projects now that people persist with that just don't seem to be going anywhere. You know, they really need that upside, but you need that portfolio approach. So our flagship project, Hamagtai, is located about 100 kilometres north of the giant Oyu Tolgoi deposit. This is a project that was explored by Ivanhoe in the early 2000s, and we were able to secure in 2016. And after a few years of exploration, we've been able to put together a mineral resource estimate that's 0.6 billion tonnes. It's got close to 2 million tonnes of copper and over 4 million ounces of gold. So not bad for 3 years of exploration. And where we're sitting today, that sits within an open pit resource. So that's constrained by open pit economics. But this system remains wide open. And once we put together that resource, the next stage was about how big could it be? Because we'd already put together the open pit. And, I see around the world, and it goes back to your question, I guess, Greg, about, mature terrains. I see people globally drilling holes for copper well below 1,000 meters. Most of our resource sits with zero strip. You can walk on it, it sits at surface. So, now the way I look at this resource, this de-risks us to go deeper now because we've already established an open pit resource. Now all we're doing is following the system deeper and deeper and just seeing how large it can be. So, we've achieved a record resource growth in that deposit, which, when I look at exploration companies, I like to rank on when that money spent on the ground, what's your cost of discovery? So for every pound of copper we've discovered at Hamagtai, it's cost us less than a cent of investors' money to put in the ground. And when you compare that globally, the global average is getting close to 7 or 8 cents, and it obviously includes risk. That cost of discovery is a critical component, and we're one of the lowest cost discoverers globally. So after a successful raise a few months ago, bringing in some very good domestic institutions, we've just started a 30,000 metre drill program. So we're active in the South Gobi now with 4 drill rigs and aggressively growing and expanding that resource. We sit on an established mining licence with 30 years of tenure. It's a very large mining license, so we have secured a very large area, this prospective area now, where it's just about showing how big it can be with a focus on expanding the high-grade parts to it. Because when we look at our resource at Hamagtai, we have, more importantly, a very high-grade component to it. And when I look at it, and when I look at copper projects, I like to see copper projects that have very large resources of contained copper. But what you want to see is a subset of high-grade material. And when we look at our Hamagtai project, we have 54 million tonnes at over 0.8% copper equivalent starting from surface, because these are very large capex items ultimately, but you really want that grade up front to, boost the economics of the project. And they're the ones that seem to take off quickly.
Absolutely. And, speaking of taking off, so you're currently drilling. You said you have 4 rigs out there right now, and is this? I assume that is the next logical step to look to expand out the resource.
Yeah. Look, we're about expanding, so we're doing some broad step outs. Like, I wouldn't like to promise a resource upgrade because we don't know what's out there. So we're doing very broad 500 and up to kilometre step outs from the current resource. In fact, sitting here today, I've got one drill rig 8 kilometres away from the resource. So this is a big system, and our idea is to do broad step outs. So in this phase of 30,000 metres is to understand where are the edges of the system and where are the high grade parts of it broadly, and then that will allow us to go into an infill resource program following that.
Excellent. And when you're on such a big land mass, one of the items that you alluded to earlier was, as a business person, not necessarily as a geologist also, but putting that hat on for a second, is to secure that big land mass, which is something I know that you're focused on from a title perspective. Can you just talk about Xanadu and where do you stand and how your approach is?
I think it's important because you look at these mineral belts, and porphyries often occur as multiple deposits. They're not just one connected system. And often you see them as kind of like fingers. You find one, you find the second, and you find the third. And our direct analogues are Oyu-Tolgoi, which is close by. You have that discovery here, you have this one. How you grow that resource is continued discovery. So there's no point in holding a postage stamp when you're exploring for these types of systems, because you don't want to put all your IP and understand the system, have success, and find out someone else has got the license. It's about controlling that terrain. And that's an important part of it, because ultimately, we're looking for a project for a larger company to come in, and they want to see that there's upside and control all the metal in the district. And so controlling that large area is critical. And you do that very early on. There's no point, as I said, having a discovery and expanding all your IP to find out someone else has got the project under their license.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that's like your worst nightmare in some ways.
Yeah, and it's amazing how often it happens.
Yeah, true. And so, as you said before, that you just completed a capital raising, so you do have. Can you just talk about the capital position, like what's required over maybe the next 6 months? Because obviously, like this is a multi-year project, but people like to know also what's going to take place over the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, look, for us, it's all about the drilling now. We've set the base. We've got a very large resource. In fact, it's one of the largest resources on the AXX as copper and gold. More importantly, it's got a lot of gold in it too, which is, these are, when you look at copper projects, it's the ones with gold that typically get built first because that gold is so valuable. It's about drilling and expanding, and we've done a lot of work in terms of on the ground, the geophysics now, that level of data and the level of understanding. We're in a brownfields environment, I like to say. This is not a greenfields project anymore because we've already established quite a large resource and we understand the geology. And it's about focusing on how we get as much high grade into that next resource as possible. Because we know that's critical to to the economics of these deposits. And, where we sit, a lot of projects sit out there globally at the moment at 0.5. We need to differentiate Hamagtai and move it up the value curve in terms of grade. And that drilling is all about where these high grade parts are. And as I said to you, we've already got a subset of our resource, which is high grade. It's about stepping out and expanding that. And we believe that differentiating our project from others is the critical step we need to do now in the next 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And also talking about differentiating yourself, we're always taught not to compare in life, but we always do compare ourselves. Can you just maybe give the audience a little bit of a feel for how does Xanadu, especially compared to other ASX or Toronto Stock Exchange companies?
Yeah. Look, I think that what's interesting, we talk about this growing demand for copper. And if you want to ride that wave of investing in copper, you need to be looking at porphyry copper deposits because these are the projects that add or produce most of the copper globally. And we all know that it's very heavily weighted towards supply destruction at the moment. We know that the EV part of the story is coming, but what we're not doing is we're not finding porphyry copper deposits globally. We're not developing them, we're not building them, and they're not going into production. So there's a huge lag time here. But if I look at the copper companies that are doing this at the moment, you can count them on one hand on the AXX, and you can probably count them on one hand on the TXX. So if you apply, some will be successful, some will work in terrains that won't be built. And we know that risk of, construction is often one of the highest risks in this business. There's very few companies actually looking for projects that big mining companies want to get involved with and build in the future. And that's what's compelling about it. But sitting here today at Xanadu, when we look at our enterprise value of our copper resources in the ground, that sits at about $13 to $14 per tonne in terms of our market cap, but most of our peers sit at about 27 and plus to $30 per enterprise value of tonne of copper in the ground. So, we look quite cheap compared to how successful we've been at adding those resources and how committed we are to this next phase of expansion of the resource.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically, as you said, you're about half that value. And, contrary to, or I don't know if it's contrary, but people may not know that Mongolia is actually a good place to do business. And as you said, you're on China's doorstep. So, down the line, the natural infrastructure and demand side should certainly take place. We've only got a couple more minutes. Andrew, are there any closing thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience with?
No, and I think that we talked a lot about Hamagtai, but also in our portfolio, we have another project called Red Mountain. And earlier this year, we were able to sign a joint venture with JOGMEC. It's interesting because JOGMEC represents the Japanese government and, have been looking at base metal projects lately. And, you would say that Japan has always had a steady supply of concentrate, but now they're quite aggressively pursuing copper projects on the ground. And that tells you something of where they see supply going in the future. But we were lucky, and with good effort, we signed a joint venture with JOGMEC on one of our projects. They have the ability to earn 51% interest in this Red Mountain project. And they will be spending $7.2 million over the next 4 years to earn the project. So we're going to have news flow on two fronts. We're a small company, and I guess embarrassed by the riches of having two large projects in one small company. But now that we've solved that funding issue for our project, we can focus on Hamagtai. And we are operating the Red Mountain project on the ground, similar geology to Hamagtai. So, we're using the same approach to that exploration. So, active on 2 very large projects, and with one of them funded with minimising dilution to shareholders.
Absolutely. Andrew, please keep us up, because certainly, it is an incredibly exciting story that it could be multi-years. As you said, these projects take a long time, but there is short-term news flow and very much long-term upside. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
No problems, Greg, and we can link up in a couple months' time, probably when we get some drill results, and have another chat.
Love to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you for watching another presentation by 180 Markets. Don't forget, if you want access to thousands of ASX capital raises, head on over to 180markets.com.au, sign up, and get on board for our very next capital raise. Thanks for watching.